Welcome to week 2 practice exercises. Today we are going to calculate the proceeds of a bond sale, amortization of the first and second interest payments, interest expense for the first year, and we're also going to journalize all of these calculations. So let's go ahead and start with what the question is. At the very top it says, Boyd Company produces and sells aviation equipment. On the first day of its fiscal year, Boyd issues $80 million of 5-year, 9% bonds at a market interest rate of 12% with interest payable semi-annually. So we're going to compute the things that we had just talked about and also journalize at the very end. So before we get started, let's just talk about the type of bond. So even if we weren't told in the description that this is a discount, how would we know what type of bond this is? So the answer is to kind of look at how the bonds are being issued. The bonds are being issued at 9%, even though the effective interest rate is 12%. So what's really going on here is that Boyd is issuing bonds, and they're saying, hey guys, I have some bonds here that I want you to buy, and I promise that I will pay you 9% a year if you buy my bonds. And I understand that all of the other companies are selling their bonds and they're going to pay 12% interest, but I really think you're going to like my bonds. What's going to induce me to buy their bonds when they're only going to pay me 9% a year, when I could go buy something with a similar risk profile that would pay me 12%? Well, the only way that they can really do that is to basically put their bonds on sale. But instead of calling it a sale, they call it a discount. So that's what we're doing here. This bond is a discount, and this is how they encourage customers to buy their bonds. The second thing I want to talk about is the difference between $1 and an annuity of $1. So if I promise to pay you $1 in 5 years, that means you have to wait 5 years to get that $1. But if I gave you an annuity of $1 payable annually, then that means I'm going to give you $1 at the end of every year. So at the end of the 5th year, you will have $5. This is going to come into play as we calculate this information. I went ahead and pulled the 2 exhibits. One is the present value of $1 at compound interest, and the other is the present value of an annuity at $1 at compound interest. And we're actually going to use this right out of the gate. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate the amount of cash proceeds from the sale of the bonds. The first thing we need is that present value number. So I'm going to bring down my exhibit 5, which is the present value of $1. I'm going to blow it up so that we can all see it. And so the present value of $1 for 10 semi-annual periods, and it's 10 because it was 5 years, but we're paying it in semi-annual payments, right? So that means we have 10 payments. So I'm going to come down here. We have our periods. I'm going to come to the 10. And then I'm going to scroll all the way over until I get to the 6%. And we're using 6% because the market interest rate is 12%, but we don't pay 12% every time we pay the interest payment. We only pay half of that, which happens to be 6%. So I'm going to use this number, 0.55839, and you can see that I've already written it in here. So that's how you find your information. Now I'm going to base all of this on the face amount of the bonds. And we were told in the problem above that it's $80 million. And so then all I'm going to do is multiply these two together to get the present value of the face value, right? Step 2, now we need to calculate the present value of the annuity. And the annuity is the interest payments. So again, it's the value of an annuity at $1 for 10 periods at 6%. So now I'm going to drag over a different table, and this is the table for the annuity. I'm going to blow this one up. And I'm going to come down to the 10 periods again. I'm going to scroll over to the 6%. And you can see that that number is vastly different. And it's because we're receiving $1 every period for the next 10 periods. So we're going to use 7.36009, and you can see that I've already entered that here. And now I need to know, how much am I paying in interest every period? This is where I'm going to use the 9%. And you can see that I've taken that 9% and I've divided it by 2, which is 4.5. So now I take my $80 million and I multiply it by 4.5%. That gives me $3.6 million that I will pay every 6 months. Now my next step is to multiply my factor by the amount I'm paying in interest. And that gives me a present value of $26 million and some change. I can now add the present value of the face amount of the bonds and the present value of the interest payments together, and my cash proceeds from this bond sale is going to be $71 million. Let's move on to the next one. The next question that we had to answer was the amount of the discount to be amortized for the first semi-annual interest payment. And we're using the interest method, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to calculate the carrying amount. Well, the carrying amount was here, and all we have to do is grab that number and put it into the cell. Step 2 is now we have to calculate 6% of that carrying amount. And we do that again simply by taking that 7.1 and multiplying it by 6%. Then we also want to subtract out the first semi-annual interest payment. And we calculated that above, right? So now the discount that we're going to amortize is just the difference between the two, which is $670,000. Now we're going to move on to the third question, which is to amortize the discount for the second semi-annual interest payment. We're still using the interest method. We're going to calculate the carrying amount, and that's where we have to add our amortized balance to our bond balance. So if you notice, we're looking at 71.8 here. Up here, it was only 71.1. So how did we get there? We scroll up. There we go. So we want to take the proceeds of the bond payment, and we want to add in the amount that we amortized. That is our carrying amount. And now we want to take 6% of that carrying amount. So the same thing, we take the amount, we multiply it by 6%. We want to subtract out our first semi-annual interest payment. I'm sorry, that should say second. Let me fix that real quick. And now the discount that we're going to amortize is $710. You would repeat this over and over and over again until you were finished with your finished amortizing your discount. So now the last thing that they wanted us to calculate was the amount of the interest bond expense for the first year. So first, we want to calculate the annual interest that we paid, right? And that was really just the $3,600 twice. And I said 3,600, it's actually 3.6 million. So 3.6 million times 2, because we paid it twice, that gives us 7.2 million. Now we have to add in the discount that we amortized. And all I did was I picked up the first discount that we amortized and the second amount that we amortized. And now I can fully calculate the interest expense for the first year for this particular bond. So we did all of the calculations, but now we have to actually put it into our register. So we're going to journalize the entry. So the first one is to journalize the entry to record the amount of cash proceeds from the issuance of the bond. So we know how much, well, we know that we're going to receive cash, right? And we know that we posted a discount, so that needs to be added to the cash because our face value of the bonds must be 80 million. So I just picked up the cash amount that we calculated up here. That's the 71. And then the discounts on the bonds payable is the difference between the two. Now we want to journalize the first payment. We have an interest expense. We know that it's 3.6 million. And we also have a discount on the bond payable. Again, we calculated this above. And now our cash is 4.2 million. So we've walked through all of the steps to calculate the proceeds of a bond sale, to amortize our discount, and to calculate our yearly interest expense. Now let's look at how can we use loan amortization to our advantage. And the easiest way to do that is to think about buying a car. Most of us, well, not most of us, but many of us will enter into a loan agreement of 60 months. And we're told how much we will need to pay. And for this example, it's 7.4%. And we're also told how much our monthly payment is going to be. And again, in this example, it's $300 every month. So what I've done is I've created my own amortization table. We know that I bought a car for $15,000. Every month I have to pay $300, but of that $300, how much of it is principal and how much of it is interest? And that's what this amortization schedule lets me see. At the very end of this amortization schedule, I see that even though my car was $15,000, I ended up paying almost $18,000 when you calculate in the interest that you accrue over the course of the loan, right? In our discussion question, we have we receive $4,500 extra, a bonus in our paycheck. If I were to add $4,500 up here at the top, you can see that it's going to change things quite dramatically. So I'm just going to put $4,500 here. And because I made the payment very early on, I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to wipe out, I'm going to make that equal the last payment. And then I'm going to wipe out everything else. And remember, we were almost at $1,800, right? You can see that by paying that $4,500 early, I now am only paying $16,400 for the car versus the almost $18,000. And that's because I was able to wipe out a significant amount of interest that was assessed on my second payment. So as you answer this discussion question, kind of keep in mind how much you want to, or how you might want to use a particular bonus. All right, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next video.